What's going on, everybody? My name is Tyler.psd, but I mean, you can just call me Tyler at this point. I'm making you a video that isn't ripped from my live stream, even though I am using OBS and like 3500 bitrate to record this right now. But anyways, it is a separate video from my live stream. Whoa, what are you doing? Well, today, as you can see, I'm going to be making a sort of tips and tricks video. It's going to be a video about basically how to make my turn 8 Mage deck that I've just been stomping on people with lately. You can check the description down below to take you to the Hearthstone deck page, which gives you an even more in-depth detail to how to play this deck and the strategy behind it, and so on and so forth. This is loosely based on Kripparrian's turn 8 Mage, except it has a little bit of a more aggro or more rush feel to it. So it's more like a rush mage deck that basically if you don't hit that turn 8, then you can still do a lot of damage and basically hit lethal with one card, which you will see in a second. But let's open up a new deck here, and I'm going to show you exactly how to make this deck here. So we're going to be making a mage deck, as you can see. And basically what the focus of this deck is to balance spells with minions. And because it's a mage deck and there are a lot of spells in it and a lot of minions that either gain something from a spell or buff the spell's damage or whatever, it's a very good synergy throughout the entire deck. So basically what you want to do is try to keep the same number of minions and spells in your hand at all times, with some exceptions which I will explain later in the deck, but that's the general strategy behind it. So what we're going to be starting out with here is Arcane Missiles, and basically with Arcane Missiles it's just a really good card. For 1 mana you can do 3 damage. What I try to do is I try to save it if you end up getting it off of the mulligan, try to save at least one of them, because especially if you're playing against a priest, because the priest has that really annoying 1/3 card that basically draws him a card every time you heal. So using this along with your Fire Blast ability on turn 3, or just using that on turn 1, could easily throw a little bit of damage towards the enemy. And if it's a priest deck and he's got that on the field, then it'll throw a little bit of damage against that as well. So it's a good card to have. So we're going to take 2 of those guys, and we're also going to take 2 mirror images, and I will explain a little bit of a combo damage with the mirror images later in the video. Taking 2 mana worms because that's just a strong card, and you always want to keep the mana worms on the mulligan. Do not throw your mana worms away, especially if you end up getting the coin for second turn, because unless you're playing against some sort of clearer, I guess you could say, like the warrior has deal 2 damage to 2 random enemies, and then there's also the the hunter that does 3 damage to 2 random enemies, which can take out these. So unless you're playing against those 2, always throw your mana worms down on the first turn. And if you have a coin and the enemy didn't play anything threatening, then you want to throw both your mana worms down on turn 1, and that paves room for having a mirror image or an arcane missile, or even both of them on turn number 2. So good strategy with the mana worm. You also want to throw in 2 Frostbolts, because Frostbolts are also a very powerful card for only 2 mana. And we're also going to be taking Sorcerer's Apprentice, because as you can see, your spells cost 1 less when you have this on the field, which is pretty ridiculous, especially for 1 mana spells, because they become 0. So if you can throw this down on turn number 2 without even having to coin it out or anything like that, basically you can play a mirror image or an arcane missile, or however many mirror images or arcane missiles as you possibly want on turn 2, which gives you a pretty big advantage over the enemy, especially if you have a mana worm on the field as well from turn 1. So Sorcerer's Apprentice is next. Next up, you're going to want to throw in the Cone of Cold. That's it. I was like, wait a minute. You want to throw in 2 of these Cone of Colds, because as you're going to see later on in this deck, you're going to want to basically spell damage buff as soon as you possibly can. We're going to be throwing in Azure Drake in a minute, which is a very, very powerful card because you get to draw a card and your spells do 1 extra damage. And depending on how many enemies the people have on the field, you can really spread out your damage accordingly with Flame Strikes and Blizzards. And then this will also do 2 damage to three separate enemies for only 4 3 mana with Sorcerer's Apprentice as well. So that's a pretty ridiculous card as well. So next thing we're going to throw in is 2 Fireballs, because this is basically the premise of the deck. Turn 8 Mage, you basically want to be able to get the enemy down to 12 damage, or 10 damage if it's a Priest or a Warrior, because they can just buff themselves up to 12 damage anyways with the Fireballs. So then on turn 8, if you have 2 Fireballs in your hand, you can basically just kill them right away, because they have any Taunters on the field, they have anything on the field. The only thing that really counters the double Fireball or the Pyroblast is a Loatheb. But you're going to see later in this deck we have a 5 damage charge card that will take care of Loatheb really easily, which is a very good counter as well. So those 2 Fireballs are very essential in this deck. If you're going to do any card swaps, I would never take those out, as well as Pyroblast, because those are pretty ridiculous cards. So next you want to throw in your double Water Elemental. We're not taking any polymorphs in this deck just because we want basically damage. We don't want to we basically have counters or free, it's like a counter to a full board or whatever, and you'll see that there are counters for basically single big enemies, so you don't need to use polymorphs on them. So Water Elemental is actually one of those counters, and because it has 6 health, it's pretty powerful for a 4 mana card. And then when you throw this on the field, the next turn you can obviously do 3 damage to an enemy, and it will also freeze them, or you can just do 3 damage to the face, which I like to do against enemies that have a lot of weapons, such as a rogue or a warrior or a hunter as well. So like that, we're going with that. So next up, we're going to be also putting in 2 Blizzards, which do 2 damage to enemy minions and freeze them. So that this is basically a board clear / board stuller, because obviously if you can't kill them, it's still going to freeze them, so they're not going to be able to do any damage to you. And in that case, a follow-up turn of Flame Strike will basically do 6 damage to all enemies. And keeping in mind that you also can have spell damage buffs on the turn before with Azure Drake, it's pretty ridiculous that that combo exists. So yeah, we're only going to be taking 1 Flame Strike, and that's just to make room for some of the other stuff, because Flame Strike is just such a powerful card anyways, and since it's a turn 8 Mage, you're not going to really want to use 2 Flame Strikes anyways. So we're also going to be taking Pyroblast, which is just the most overpowered card in the freaking game. It used to be an 8 mana cost, it's now a 10 mana cost, but even still, this is going to be your finisher, so always save that. I would never use it unless it's absolutely impossible for you to it's basically impossible for you to live by the next turn. So you only use that to finish off the enemy and do face damage, so on and so forth. Alright, so now we're going to go into the neutral cards, and we're going to start off with Acidic Swamp Ooze. So you want 2 of these. Now, on the mulligan, if you're playing against a warrior, you want to always keep 1 Acidic Swamp Ooze, and that's a counter for Fiery War Axe, which is a 2 mana cost for a warrior. So basically what you can do is, as soon as he plays that, he might do 3 damage to the face, but it doesn't really matter because he's not going to have 6 damage anymore. You can go ahead and play Acidic Swamp Ooze, get rid of that Fiery War Axe, and then the second one also will be drawn or whatever. You can, if you get 2 of them on the mulligan, I would take 1 away, just because against a warrior or a rogue or whatever, you don't really need to worry about their weapons until later in the game anyways, unless it's a Fiery War Axe, which you would keep 1 of these for. So that's why we're putting in 2 Acidic Swamp Oozes. Alright, so next we're going to look for the 3 mana buff here, which is the Shattered Sun Cleric, and what it does is give a friendly minion +1/+1. And what I use in this deck to buff is I basically throw down either my Sorcerer's Apprentice or my Mana Worm or whatever, and I use this to buff up my smaller cards. Now, if you don't mulligan either Sorcerer's Apprentice or Mana Worm, I would save this till the end when I can use it in a combo situation with Sorcerer's Apprentice or whatever, and that way Sorcerer's Apprentice stays up. on the field, because you want to keep that and Mana Worm alive as long as possible, and it's definitely harder to kill a 3 or a 4 health character than a 3 health character. So buffing the Mana Worm is probably a good idea with Shattered Sun Cleric. If not, then down the road when you get it later in the game, then you can obviously buff some of your bigger, more powerful characters. But like I said, I usually use it to buff the smaller characters in this deck. So next thing that we're going to be grabbing here is the Dark Iron Dwarf, which is right here, and we're going to be grabbing one of those guys. Basically what I use this for is just something to just give me that little bit of an extra edge against enemies. I like to throw this guy down when I have a mirror image up on the field, or even a double mirror image up on the field, because it gives one of your characters more damage. So if you wanted to, instead of hitting with the other character that you have on the field, because you can't hit with mirror image because they have 0 attack, I like to buff one of the mirror images. You get rid of one taunt, but at the same time you're also clearing the board and continuing dominance of the field, which is basically what this deck does. So you want to take one of those Dark Iron Dwarfs. Next we're going to be grabbing Spellbreaker, which is another 4 mana card, and this is a very, very good counter against big taunters or anything that has some sort of minion spell damage, or a minion spell for that matter, because you get a lot of people when you play against them, especially a priest or something like that, where the spell damage on a minion or the spell on a minion itself is extremely powerful, and you don't want that, because obviously that's countering your rush deck, because they're either going to draw a whole bunch of cards, or they're going to be able to do a whole bunch of face damage to you before you can do a whole bunch of face damage to them. And they also gain board control when they use these cards as well. So I like to use that on lower end spell damage cards, or just really big taunters that will get in your way. And then what I like to do also is I'll wait till the end of the game. So I never keep that in mulligan. I'll wait till the end of the game, or either a turn 9 or a turn 7 for this guy, and that way it opens up the field for my Pyroblast or whatever, or another minion being able to attack, because if you silence a taunt, then you can always just next turn attack with this guy as well, through not having to hit the taunt, right? So that's basically my general strategy with that guy. So like I said, we're going to be throwing in Azure Drake here, which is a 5 mana card, but it has a battle cry of drawing a card, and it has spell damage +1, which is ridiculously powerful in this deck since we have fireballs and pyroblasts. So the fireball does 6 damage, it will do 7 damage, making it a total of 14 on turn 8 if you have Azure Drake on the field. So basically what I want to do is, as soon as you draw this card, or as soon as you get 5 mana, or even you can coin it out on turn 4, try to play Azure Drake. Gives you an extra card, gives you spell damage +1, and then it makes way for your other minions and things like that. Continues board dominance, so on and so forth. So that's the one other card basically that we're going to grab. So you want 2 of those guys, the Spellbreakers, and you want the one of the Azure Drake, like I said. And then the next minion that we're going to be taking is the Archmage, which is another spell buff in here. It's right here. So the Archmage is another spell damage +1. It has 7 health, and against a priest this is especially powerful, along with Azure Drake, and this is why I chose these 2 spell damage cards, because priests have 2 cards that can directly destroy a minion for a really low cost, and that's 3 and under and 5 and over. So if you have a 4 damage card, they can't do anything about it other than taking out minions, and since you have spell damage and board clears, you're basically set against a priest if you have an Archmage or whatever, which is kind of cool. So we're gonna be taking one of those, for this deck as well. So like I said before, you always want to be able to counter the best counter to your deck. So like I was saying, Loatheb is basically the best counter card to this deck in particular, so having a counter to that is always good in a deck that you want to have. So basically what we're going to do to counter a Loatheb is put in one of these 5 damage charge cards, because it only has 2 health, so it's not really going to matter. It's taking out a 5/5 for a 5/2, so that trade is definitely worth it, especially if you have taunts up on the field or whatever, because you're basically going to want to take out Loatheb. It's obviously not going to do anything about the spells costing more the next turn, so you're not going to be able to play any spells, so this is especially important if you don't have any other minions in your hand, so not to take that 5 extra damage from that Loatheb. So we're going to throw that in as our last card, and yeah, that's basically it. This is our turn 8 Mage. There are a couple things that I obviously need to talk to you about for strategy wise and things like that. Like I said before, you want to try and balance everything out and keep as many spells and minions in your hand as each other, I guess you could say. So you want to balance them out in your hand as well as on the field. Now, couple things I need to talk to you about that are really good with this deck, and that are a couple combos. Like I said, if you have Azure Drake or Archmage or both of them on the field, you're going to be able to do a lot more damage across the field or even just to the face in general. So even if you have one of these done on the field, all you have to do is get your opponent down to 14 or 12 if it's a priest or warrior, like I said, because they can just heal themselves up by 2. As long as they don't have any heal cards, you can basically do that turn 8 fireball a little bit sooner if you have Azure Drake or Archmage down, basically like that. Another thing to note is if you have both of them down, your fireballs are going to do 16 damage. A little bit more cost efficient than Pyroblast, but 12 damage straight to the face is a very, very good ender on turn number 10, because basically what they're going to do when they see that they have almost 10 damage is they're going to throw down as many minions as they possibly can on the field and forget about spells or forget about secrets, so you're going to be able to pave your way straight to their face, basically. So and along with that, your Flame Strike and your Blizzard are very good board clears, especially if you have Azure Drake or Archmage or both of them on the field, because then you're going to be able to stall the enemy and make room for your Fireballs and Pyroblasts anyways. So yeah, that's basically it for this deck. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it's at least you learned something from it. I guess I wasn't the greatest at explaining it. I'm probably better at typing out the strategy behind this than actually explaining it. So like I said before, you can check the description down below. It'll take you to my Hearthstone or my Hearthstone deck page for this deck in particular, and there's a full write-up on exactly how to use it, exactly what the mulligan strategy and startup strategy and mid-range and all this stuff. So if you didn't really quite understand what I was trying to get to exactly with this deck, then definitely go ahead and check that out down below. So anyways guys, thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, please give me a thumbs up. If you disliked it, then give me a thumbs down, and leave in the comment section below what you would like to see for next time or next deck review. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching again, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace out.